Curse of Faces, powerful and inescapably deadly, has plagued the world for centuries. For 300 years, if any human looked upon another's face, both would die. Then, one day, a man simply known as the Maker appeared and shared his solution to the curse: masks. Though not a cure by any means, humanity was finally able to emerge from an era of solitude and begin to bring the world back from the brink of total extinction. Over the next 300 years, hidden behind the relative safety of their masks, old kingdoms were rebuilt, unlikely alliances were formed, and new empires rose. Though still forced to hide their faces to avoid a deadly fate, humanity was finally afforded some hard-won stability some 600 years after the Curse of Faces was unleashed. Now, all eyes of the continent have turned to the kingdom of Yariv, the source of the curse, as brave souls enter the mysterious kingdom in search of a cure. In Verho, Curse of Faces. While many who made the pilgrimage into Yariv were fierce and formidable warriors, courage is not exclusive to those who wield a blade. Scholars and mages from across the continent also made their way to the accursed kingdom, using their knowledge of and connection to the magical forces of the world to survive the journey. It's these magical forces, the 5 schools of magic, where we continue our journey behind the mask. Long ago, in the days of the old gods, before the Curse of Faces would even be conceived, humanity was blessed with the ability to channel the forces of mana that flow through all living things. This gift allowed humans to reach beyond their physical limitations, conjuring spells to perform feats that would otherwise be impossible through mere strength or dexterity alone. It wasn't without its cost, however. Much like any other muscle in the body, the use of magic requires practice and training to use effectively. Anyone who conjures too hastily or greedily risks injury and even death if their mana is overextended or depleted. This inherent risk led many to limit their use of magic or simply avoid it altogether. The 7 houses of Haravel are one such example. Despite their ability to use mana, their primary focus was to hone their mastery of weapons and their physical forms rather than spells and incantations. Only those who sat on the Council of Blades and wielded the magically empowered weapons of their families were the true magic users of the nation. Other parts of the continent, however, were not so hesitant to explore their magical abilities. In the southern kingdom of Moigur, elemental magic was taught to all who wished to learn it. The magical academy in the flying city of Volans was home to mages of the highest esteem, who practiced conjuring flames, ice, and electricity, summoning powerful spells that channeled the devastating power of nature. It was here where it was discovered that, while the power of the magic was dependent on the skill of the user, the cost and ease with which it could be cast could be influenced by the proximity to the element being channeled. Ice magic was more effective during a blizzard, electricity in a thunderstorm, and fire when conjured close to an open flame. Curiously, the great snakes of Moigur also showed an affinity for fire magic, though it appeared to be limited to keeping the furnaces burning in their forges. Still, the craftsmanship of the giant serpents was unmatched, leading some to believe there to be some connection between their smithing skills and their elemental affinities. Fairy stories and children's tales from Moigur spoke of other giant creatures in remote parts of the desert with connections to ice and electricity, but to this day, the great snakes remain the only non-human magic users to ever be confirmed. Moving north from Moigur to the Empire of Orion, we find an entirely different perspective on the use of magic. Where the Moigur Megarians shared their knowledge of elemental magic freely with all who desired to learn, the Orien Empire's insatiable lust for power and control meant that only those who volunteered to serve in their military were permitted to learn and practice magic. Evidently, this requirement proved to be an effective method of recruitment, with many of Orien's army having joined merely for the freedom to practice magic without fear of persecution. Unlike their neighboring nation to the south, however, Orien's mages didn't make use of the elements and were instead practitioners of Eclipse Magic. This school of magic harnesses the power of light and darkness, with those showing an aptitude for light magic becoming priests within the Maker's Order, and dark magic users going on to become inquisitors of Orien's military, leading their crusade to conquer as many territories as possible. It's important to note that despite the symbolic implications of this binary school of magic, any inferred connotations of light and darkness can be dismissed. Eclipse magic exists beyond the realm of morality, and any ethical implications can only be attributed to its users. In this case, almost exclusively the oppressive and warmongering empire of Orien. But where there are oppressors, there will always be those who resist. Though ultimately conquered by Orien's overwhelmingly vast army, the Kingdom of Warden fought valiantly to defend their nation, harnessing the true power of their school of blood magic to devastating effect. Though primarily used as a form of healing magic, Warden's Blood Knights were well versed in the offensive potential of blood magic's power, manipulating the flesh and blood of their enemies to maim, disfigure, and decimate the opposing army. Simultaneously, they used their abilities to accelerate the natural healing process of their allies by coagulating wounds and sealing lacerations. Despite their meager numbers, the unmatched power and efficiency of blood magic allowed Warden's army to hold their own for longer than any who had opposed Orien in the past. Had it not been for the sheer size of Orien's forces, Warden likely would have emerged victorious. However, the use of blood magic comes at a great cost to the user's mana reserves, and Warden's Blood Knights simply couldn't keep up with the seemingly never-ending onslaught from their invaders. Several fortuitous victories by the Orien army also resulted in them obtaining some secrets and techniques of blood magic and employing its use themselves, though this was restricted primarily to higher-ranking inquisitors within Orien's forces. Seeing the futility of their efforts and not wanting their more closely guarded secrets to fall into enemy hands, Warden offered the conditional surrender of their land and retreated to the far east island of Old Warden. There, the most devout followers of the school of blood magic jealously guard their power, isolating themselves from the rest of the continent. On an island off the western coast of the continent, equally isolated from the mainland, live the users of an entirely different school of magic. Blessed by the wind god themselves, the people of the Blinded Isles are masters of air manipulation, so adept that they can detect minute changes in pressure with such accuracy that they can effectively see using the air around them. This is of course necessary, as the people here practice gouging out the eyes of their newborns in order to obtain the wind god's blessing. Barbaric as it may be, this was practiced long before the rise of the Maker and the advent of masks, making the Blinded Isles the only place in the world to have almost entirely circumvented the Curse of Faces in the early days of its devastation. Unlike the isolationism of Old Warden, however, where outsiders are kept out to guard the secrets of blood magic, the Blinded Isles guard their home out of contempt for the people of the mainland, even going so far as to position mages along its coast with the power to conjure hurricane-forced winds to redirect or capsize exploratory vessels that sail too close to their shores. This animosity likely stems directly from the wind god themselves, who, while unable to prevent anyone from learning and harnessing the power of wind magic, torments any who may attempt to control the wind without their blessing, driving them mad with unintelligible disembodied voices and hallucinations. Though the exact reason for the wind god's contempt is unknown to most, if not all, of the world's population, it's rumored that the answers might be found in the kingdom of Yariv. The fifth and final school of magic is perhaps the most controversial of all, the School of Death. Universally outlawed throughout all the kingdoms, to even admit to knowing how to conjure death magic is a punishable offense. While other schools of magic may indeed have the power to end someone's life, they at least provide some practical applications such as conjuring flames or healing wounds. Death magic, on the other hand, appears to exist only to inflict suffering. Named such for the only eventual outcome of being affected by a spell from this school, death magic centers around poison, infection, pestilence, and cancer, with victims welcoming death as a merciful release from their suffering rather than a fearful end. Understandably, users of this kind of magic are few and far between, relegated to the shadows to avoid ostracization, exile, or execution. Some believe that a secret society of assassins were the first to discover this form of magic and still use it to this day. But the only records that exist of anyone caught using death magic have been traveling merchants selling spells to jilted lovers and their broken-hearted customers who claimed revenge for their partner's infidelity. Interestingly, the Curse of Faces, perhaps the most powerful magic to have ever been conjured in the history of this world, belongs to none of these schools. Scholars have speculated that perhaps it was a form of blood magic, given the explosive effect it has on its victims' heads when they look upon another's face. Or perhaps simply death magic, due to the widespread devastation to humanity's population. Victims of the Curse of Faces, however, don't suffer like other forms of death magic, and the scale of the curse's effect is far beyond what even the most powerful Blood Knight could achieve. With nothing but the knowledge of the curse's effects and its origin, mages from around the world, regardless of the school of magic they ascribe to, have no power to put an end to its inescapable effects. Only those brave enough to venture into Yariv, the source of the Curse of Faces, have any hope of uncovering its mysteries or bringing about its end. If you are one such warrior, download Verho Curse of Faces, now available on Steam, and unravel the secrets of this apocalyptic curse. Should your trepidation cause you to hesitate, however, you can try the demo for free and bring your save file over to the full version. For more content like this, be sure to subscribe to Cobra Teku Games, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you all for watching.